Good morning, friends. In this video, we'll discuss Order 16 to Order 20 and also Section 33 CPC. Once issues have been framed, the parties can lead their evidence. Sometimes parties needs to call for some of the witnesses or experts in support of their claim. So the procedure is mentioned in Order 16, summoning and attendance of witnesses, and within 15 days of framing of the issues, it is mandatory on the part of the parties to file a list of witnesses so that they can call them as witnesses in their on their behalf. Generally, parties can examine themselves if they want to ask the court to issue summons to the witnesses. Sometimes witnesses may say that unless and until they receive summons, they may not come and depose before the court. Therefore, if a party wants to the court to issue summons to witnesses, they have to file a list of witnesses at least before 15 days of framing of the issues. This is what mentioned in Rule 1 of Order 16. They can bring any witness of their choice, but if they want to seek the summons from the court, they have to file the list of witnesses. Then they have to pay the expenses to the witnesses, witness beta it is called. Under Rule 2, it depends on the nature of the witness they want to examine, like experts or third parties or some official witnesses. Depending on there is a scale provided depending on the distance they have to travel and their class of witnesses. The scale may vary. This is mentioned in Civil Rules of Practice also. Then Rule 16, in Order Rule 16, how the summons have to be served on the parties, that is also mentioned in Rules in Order 16. It is like serving up summons on the witnesses, and when summons to produce a document is given under Rule 6 of Order 16, it is sufficient for the witness to the person who received the summons just to produce the document and he did not appear in person. This is what mentioned in Rule 6 of Order 16. Similarly, if a person fails to obey the summons to appear before the court, to stand as a witness and to depose as a witness, the court can first issue either summons. Upon satisfaction that the summons have been duly served, the court can issue a proclamation to be affixed at the residence of that witness, and if upon his failure to attend before the court can also issue a warrant either with bail or bailable, and once the court can also pass an order for attachment of the property of such witness, and if the court sees that he appears and gives evidence, the attachment can be raised and he can be set free. That is, this procedure is mentioned in Rule 10 and 12 of Order 16. So this is with regard to Order 16, friends. And Order 17 is also very important. This is with regard to adjournments. Adjournments can be given to a party in a civil proceeding not more than 3 times. Only adjournments can be granted only 3 times. Otherwise, if the party seeks adjournments more than 3 times, the court can impose costs according to the Rule 2 of Order 17. So, whenever there is an adjournment is required, the court needs to record the reasons for granting such adjournment, and it shall not be more than 3 times to a party. Then Order 17 Rule 2 is also very important. If the parties fail to appear on a day fixed for hearing of the suit, the court can proceed with the suit in the manner provided in Order 9, that is, passing ex parte orders, either dismissing the suit for default or passing an ex parte order or judgment. And similarly, if the court feels that maximum hearing is completed, the trial is about to be completed, and material portion of the trial is completed, the court can pass a judgment by virtue of explanation to Rule 2. Sometimes party fails to appear after both sides' evidence is closed and the case is posted for arguments. The parties keep themselves silent. Then what is the procedure? The court can pronounce the judgment with the available record and evidence. Otherwise, it can also proceed according to Rule 2 of Order 17. So this is with regard to Order 17. Then important order in civil trial is Order 18. This is with regard to examination of the parties. So friends, after amendment, examination of the parties, that is according to 136 to 135, 136 and 137 of Evidence Act, they say that the examination of the parties is according to the procedure of concerned courts, that is criminal court or civil court, and manner of examination, order of examination is chief examination, cross examination and re-examination. So both cases, criminal case or civil case, prosecution examines in chief, thereafter accused counsel cross-examine, then re-examination if necessary by the prosecution. Similarly, in civil cases also, plaintiff or party who wishes to examine a witness as chief examination, the opponent party cross-examines the witness, thereafter re-examination with the permission of the court. Then hearing of the suit, and who has to begin the suit? Generally, normally the suit will be commenced by the plaintiff unless the defendant admits the claim of the plaintiff. For example, in a suit for recovery of money, the defendant admits the execution of the promissory note, but he says that he takes a plea of discharge. Then the court can frame the issue with regard to proof of the plea of the defendant, that is discharged. Because the burden is on the defendant, the court can ask, and the defendant and the plaintiff can file a memo, choose to file a memo stating that already his allegation of execution of the promissory note is admitted, therefore admitted fact need not be proved. It is for the defendant to prove his defense of discharge. Then he can ask the defendant to lead the evidence first by reserving his right to give reply evidence. Therefore, right to begin, Rule 1 says normally with the plaintiff. Then Rule 3, evidence on several issues, and Rule 3A is important. If there are one or two of the plaintiff or one or two or more of the defendants, generally parties to the proceedings have to be examined first, then they can bring the witnesses subsequently. If the plaintiff, there are 5 plaintiffs, for example, if there are 5 plaintiffs in a proceeding, the plaintiff examined, plaintiff number 1 examined as PW1, plaintiff number 3 examined as PW2, and they want to examine an outsider, third party, as at PW3. Then again, plaintiff number 2 or 5 cannot be examined as PW4. This is what the purport of Rule 3A. They can, however, examine subsequent to a witness by taking permission of the court. With the leave of the court, they can examine. For that, they have to file a memo before closure of evidence, before stating that they wishes to examine a third party before they are examined. They have to seek the permission of the court. Then only they can examine. Otherwise, they are barred from examining subsequent to the party who is subsequent to the third party who is examined prior to them. Then recording of evidence, after amendment to CPC in 2002, from 1/7/2002, recording a chief examination of a witness shall be on affidavit. It says it shall not be recorded. Chief examination shall not be recorded in court. It shall be on affidavit, and cross-examination can be done before the court or by way of appointment of commissioner. That is mentioned in Rule 4. Therefore, there is no examination of chief in the court. It is by way of affidavit. The affidavit, the contents of the chief examination will be filed by the parties by way of an affidavit, and they mention the documents. The court takes when the witness is called, the court administers the oath and confirms the contents of the chief examination, the documents will be marked. Thereafter, cross-examination by the other party. Therefore, chief examination shall be on affidavit according to Order 18, Rule 4. And one more important, and the language of the court is English, and there can be the witnesses can take translators. The language of the courts is English. Evidence has to be recorded in English. After evidence is being recorded, the same has to be interpreted to the witness, read over to the witness, and the witness, after understanding the evidence given by him, needs to sign on the evidence. Thereafter, that should be endorsed by the judge with regard to the manner in which has been taken, and also it has been read over to the witness and he understood the same and he is verified and confirmed the contents of his evidence. Then the judge will sign. This is that entire exercise and entire document will be called as deposition of witness. And according to the circulars of the High Court, whenever an evidence is recorded, duplicate copy of the evidence can be given to the party immediately on payment of usual charges. And Rule 16 is very important rule, Order 18, Rule 16. Necessity may arise sometimes to the parties to examine any witness immediately. For example, a suit for declaration of title has been filed, or the defendant files a will deed, defense written statement along with the will deed. So one of the attestors of the will deed is on bedridden condition and is in anticipation of death, or sometimes witnesses may go abroad, may left the country, left the place. Therefore, it may not be possible for them to come again easily, or sometimes they may not come again. Therefore, that party who wishes to examine the evidence of such particular witness is very essential for the purpose of proving the case of the plaintiff or defense of the defendant. Then they can make an application under Order 18, Rule 16, and they can produce such witness, and the court, upon such terms and conditions or upon proof of such exigency circumstances, the court can order for examination of the said witness. This is what provided under Order 18, Rule 16. And Rule 17 is very important. Of late, our office has been receiving civil division petitions upon this rule. Every time parties invoke this rule to drag on the proceedings, sometimes there may be necessity for recalling and reopening the evidence for the purpose of proving crucial aspects of the matter. Therefore, they can invoke Order 18, Rule 17. It says the court may at any stage of a suit recall any witness who has been examined and may put such questions to him as the court thinks fit. So motu also the court can recall, or upon the application of the parties, the court permit them to recall any witness who has been examined earlier, or a fresh witness can be examined for the purpose of deciding any matter in the controversy. And the idea, as we discussed in the first class itself, the duty of the courts is to do justice, and courts are meant for doing justice, not for observing the discipline among the parties. Therefore, if the court feels that the examination of such witness, the re-examination of such witness is necessary and essential for the purpose of determining the real issue in controversy, the court needs to allow the application. Even by invoking Section 151, that is inherent power of the court, a witness can be recalled, reopened, and certain guidelines have been issued. There are two judgments. One is Vadiraj Nagappa Varnekar versus Sharad Chand Prabhakar. Vadiraj Nagappa Varnekar versus Sharad Chand Prabhakar, AIR 2009, Supreme Court 1604. And another judgment is Mangeram versus Ramrati, 2016 judgment. So this is also very important. These two judgments laid down a ratio with regard to exercise of power given to the courts under Order 18 Rule 17 with regard to examination, recalling of witnesses and reopening of suits. So whenever the term may is used, it means it is the discretionary power of the court, and to exercise such discretion, to invoke such discretionary power of the court, parties needs to establish good facts, good grounds for existence or existence to recall a witness in support of his claim or defense. So, Order 18 Rule 17 empowers the court to recall a witness who has already been examined. These two judgments are very important. And friends, you should remind that whenever you want to draft an application in support of your case, you want to file a petition by invoking the provisions of CPC, please read the provision once. Please read the provision. What are the ingredients of the provision? And at least read one judgment upon the latest judgment on that aspect, so that you would be in a position to appreciate the law and the ratio laid down, and what are the parameters to invoke the powers of the court in respect of those provisions, so that you would be in a position to draft your affidavit and petition in such a way that the courts would allow your application, and so that you can do justice to your client. So therefore, you read the provision and also read one latest judgment on that aspect, whatever it is, Order 9 Rule 13, Order 18 Rule 17, additional evidence affidavit, Order 6 Rule 17 affidavit, any application, Order 1 Rule 10 application, so that there may not be any problem. See what happens when you file an application without mentioning correct facts or whatever it is, but the application is very much essential for your case, but the trial judge may not appreciate the reason properly because of lack of better particulars in your affidavit. The trial judge dismisses the application, the matter will be carried up to High Court. The High Court judge also may not be in a position, or sometimes he may grant stay basing on the case put forth before the High Court judge, and the matter will be pending for years together. So to avoid this kind of practice, CPC is a beautifully drafted legislation, you can invoke these provisions, but go through the provisions once. This is what I appeal to the young practitioners. Cultivate the habit of reading the provision before it being invoked, and read one latest judgment of, and thanks to technology you can find any number of citations on Indian Qanun for free. Then power to get statements recorded on commission. The court is also having power to examine the parties by way of appointment of commissioners. This is what mentioned in Order 18. Then friends, affidavits, it is with regard to Order 19, parties can file affidavits to prove a particular fact, and the other party is also having right to cross-examine the deponent. And matters to which affidavits shall be confined is mentioned in Rule 3. It should be confined to such facts as deponent is able to his own knowledge to prove, except on interlocutory applications on which statements of his belief may be admitted, provided that the grounds thereof are stated. So whatever he got personal knowledge, those facts alone have to be mentioned, except for interlocutory applications. Then important order is Order 20 and Section 33 CPC. They speak about judgment and decree, and Order 20. Order 20 speaks about judgment. Judgment to be pronounced as soon as practicable, not later than 60 days. And if a judge prepares a judgment and signs the judgment but fails to pronounce, then the successor judge can pronounce the judgment written by his predecessor. And whenever a judgment is pronounced, a decree shall be followed, and preparation of decree is the clerical affair. It shall be prepared within 15 days of passing of judgment, but it shall be in agreement with the judgment. Whatever the reliefs granted in the judgment must be reflected in the decree, and whatever the reliefs not refused by the judgment in the judgment must not be reflected in the decree. They must say that those reliefs are refused. Similarly, if the judgment or decree is silent with regard to any relief claim, it is deemed that they are refused. The manner of delivering the judgment is provided in Order 20 and rules therein, and it says that a judge shall pronounce a judgment written not pronounced by his predecessor, and judgment need to be signed. The judgment shall be dated and signed by the judge in open court at the time of pronouncing it, and when once signed shall not afterwards be altered or added to, save as provided by section 152 or review. So once the judgment is signed by the judge in the open court, it shall not be amended or altered except by following the procedure under 152, that is clerical or arithmetical mistakes in the judgment and decrees, or by way of a review under 114, section 1114 of CPC or order 47 CPC. So this is what mentioned in rule 3. And judgment of small cause courts, that has to be mentioned, and it says there is a procedure how the judgment should be in rule 1. The judge has to answer all the issues, he has to mention the reasons, he has to mention the facts of the plaintiff's case and defendant's defense, and he has to mention the issues, and he has to answer the issues by discussing evidence thereon. So those are the contents. If the judge fails to follow the procedure, the judgment will be challenged before the appellate court or superior courts, and thereby injustice would be done to the parties. Then rule 5 says court to state its decision on each issue, and contents of decree, that's what mentioned in rule 6. The decree shall agree with the judgment, it shall contain the number of the suit, the names of the description of the parties, their registered addresses and particulars of the claim, and shall specify clearly the relief granted or other determination of the suit. So other determination, relief granted or other determination. Rule 6 is very important. And definition 2.2 says what is a decree, and the manner in which it has to be drawn is mentioned in rule 6. The decree shall also state the amount of cost, and the court may direct the cost payable by one party to the other party. That has to be mentioned in the decree. And preparation of the decree, it has to be prepared. Rule 6A has been inserted. It has to be prepared within 15 days from the date on which judgment is pronounced. Order 20, Rule 6A. Then an appeal may be preferred against the decree without filing a copy of the decree. In such case, the copy made available to the party by the court shall the purpose of Rule 1 of Order 41. Order 41 explains about the procedure for preferring the appeal, and the parties can take permission to file appeal even without filing copy of decree by leave of the court. Then whenever the judgment is pronounced and decree is prepared, they shall be available to the parties by way of certified copies. And procedure where judge has vacated office before signing the decree, and the decree has to be signed by the successor judge. The court is merged with another court, and the judge of the presiding officer of the new court can also sign the decree. And the procedure for filing, drawing of decrees in various suits, like decree for recovery of immovable property, should direct that defendant should restore possession, recovery of money defendant should pay, and decree for installments, decree for mean profits, various variety, decree in a suit for preemption, decree in administration suit, decree in dissolution of partnership suits, varieties of decree in suit for partition and separate position, and a share therein must be mentioned certain ingredients. These are the manner in which this is the manner in which decrees have to be drawn by following Order 20 CPC. Then 20A speaks about cost. Section 35 speaks also section 35 and Order 20A. 35 speaks about cost even by court without jurisdiction. Sometimes this may happen. Plaintiff files a suit against the defendant for declaration, and the defendant takes the objection as to jurisdiction, and the objection of the jurisdiction as to jurisdiction of the defendant has been entertained by the court, and the court is not having jurisdiction, and the court dismisses the suit or rejects the suit. Despite the fact that the court is not having jurisdiction, that doesn't preclude the court from imposing costs on the plaintiff, because defendant has been unnecessarily dragged to the court, and therefore he was made to appear before the court, he was made to file an application, and he was made to engage a lawyer. Therefore that cost can be compensated by the plaintiff. The court can direct for payment of such cost to the defendant by the plaintiff, and despite the fact that the court is not having jurisdiction, that doesn't stop the court from granting costs. That is what mentioned in 35. 35A speaks about exemplary costs, and exemplary means unnecessary and frivolous litigation. That's what mentioned in section 35A, and 35B speaks about costs for causing delay. These are the important provisions. And then friends, one of the important provision is section 34, interest. It says that interest, how interest can be awarded in a suits for recovery of money or some particular sum of money. Interest can be awarded from the there are two varieties, pendente lite interest and post decree interest. Date of suit to date of decree, it is 6% per annum on the adjudged sum. Adjudged sum means claim of the plaintiff. It must a claim of the plaintiff from the date of suit till the date of the decree. That is called pendente lite interest. And if it is in case of commercial transaction, it may be more than 6%, or according to the contractual rate of interest, maybe more than 6%. Normal rider is 6% per annum according to section 34. And what is commercial transaction is also mentioned there. Transaction relating to industry, trade or business can be defined as a commercial transaction. If the judgment is silent as to interest deemed with regard to interest, the judgment or decree doesn't say about rate of interest or granting of interest. That means the interest is not granted, and no separate suit can be filed for the awarding of interest subsequently. The only remedy available to the party is, if you want, you can challenge it by way of appeal with regard to non-granting of interest. So pendente lite interest, post decree interest according to the contractual rate, and the court may direct, usually the courts direct according to the interest prevailing in the nationalized banks, that is 9% or whatever it is. So this is with regard to section 34, granting of interest. Thereafter, in the next class, we discuss about section 21, execution, thereafter appeal, review, revision, and other supplemental proceedings. With that, we can sum up CPC. Thank you.